Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We are blessed tonight in this prep forum to tackle a topic so relevant and urgent and foretold by our dear Lady of Lipa years ago. We are so further blessed with a speaker we know was sent to us by our Mother Mary now to delve in this topic. Our priest speaker comes from the Diocese of Borongan. He is a confessor of Sister Teresing and a staunch defender of Our Lady of Mediatrix. Let us welcome, with thanks to God, our speaker, Father Pio Aclong.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to share with you about the little things I know about Lipa apparition. And also about my being a friend of Sister Teresita Castillo and the many things we do about the mediatrix. Not so easy because what we are telling the world today, especially the Filipino people, is about the truth of the mediatrix. So I prepared my talk for tonight and I wrote them so that I will not miss some basic things that I need to tell you about the mediatrix. Allow me to read what I have prepared. I express myself with caution, lest I will be mistaken to vilify reason, which indeed the faculty we have to use in judging that concerns anything, even apparition itself. Our centuries-old title of Mary as mediatrix, apart from the apparition in Lipa, is supposed to interpret a reality about Mary. And I heard that also with the message given to Father Gobi tonight. Likewise, the apparition in 1948 is an interpretation of the same reality of her being the mediatrix. Therefore, the truth of the apparition is also the truth of the reality of her being a mediatrix, as expressed and believed by Christians about Mary in all ages. Mary is a mediatrix. The title of Mary, known as Mediatrix of all grace, is necessary in order to understand the role of Mary being a mediatrix, as she wanted herself to be called when she appeared to Teresita Castillo in 1948. Now, I will give you some messages where Mary is calling herself as Mediatrix of all grace. On September 26, 1948, Mary said to Sister Teresing, "Be very good, my little ones. I am Mary, Mediatrix of all grace." Again, on November 12, 1948, Mary said to Sister Teresing, "Pray the rosary with devotion and spread the value of saying it every day. The rosary will be the instrument for peace throughout the world. But be not afraid, for the love of my Son will soften the hardest of hearts, and my love for them will be their strength to crush the enemies of God. I am Mary, Mediatrix of all grace." Interestingly, on September 20, 1991, Mary said once again to Teresita Castillo, little one, spread the message for the youth, the future leaders of all nations. They could be instruments for peace throughout the world, if properly guided and trained in the spirit of my Son. They should work hand in hand with the grace of God through the Holy Spirit. I, your mother, will always be at hand, ready to help as Mary, mediatrix of all grace. The apparition confirms further that Mary as mediatrix is to be called specifically as mediatrix of all grace, a right and a sublime title singularly bestowed to her because of her being the Mother of God. Allow me to explain briefly the meaning of being mediatrix of all grace. Why not all graces? Why why mediatrix of grace? But she preferred to be called in Lipa as mediatrix of all grace, because all grace refers to her being the mother of Jesus, the uncaused grace, the fountain of grace. And that is the reason why she is called mediatrix of all grace, because she conceived the author of all graces, and that is Jesus Christ, the uncaused grace. The devotion in the Philippines to the mediatrix of all grace was born when she appeared in 1948 at Lipa Carmel Monastery, calling herself mediatrix of all grace. This is the cradle of our devotion, and therefore the love and understanding of the devotion intrinsically include the love and understanding of the apparition. To disregard the apparition and just focus on the devotion is to deprive the devotion of its unique character and its place of origin. The apparition event defines the unique character of the devotion. The devotion is our loving response to what had happened in 1948 at Lipa Carmel Monastery. I repeat that. Our devotion to Mary Mediatrix of all grace is our loving response to what had happened in 1948 at Lipa Carmel Monastery. But since the apparition event has been pronounced as non-supernatural, we have to obey and respect the pronouncement. But since it is not a pronouncement that carries an infallible imprint, it will always be reformable. The findings before have to be tested continually with the new development in understanding the event. There should be a genuine desire to study and understand thoroughly what happened in 1948, because the truth about the event imposes itself by virtue of its own truth. It does not mean that it has to be eradicated because it was declared by the 6 bishops as non-supernatural, or it is something preternatural, which is the unfounded claim of Father Joseph Sequia of the Archdiocese of Manila, together with his co-exorcists and lay seers. These psychical entities, such as snakes, infesting images of Mary Mediatrix of all grace, the apparition site, persons associated with the devotion, as claimed by their lay seers, are extra mentally impossible to exist because they are not observable in the domain of the physical world. It is more of an opinion than an actual reality existing. Though surely these psychical entities exist in the minds of those who conceive them, but under whose influence these thoughts are operating in the lay seers' minds, I have no idea. And this is my question.
In progress,
It's also my challenge to them to exhibit to us, to let us see those infesting snakes visible infesting the images and the operation. This should be physically observable. The apparition event in Lipa in 1948 tells us intuitively that there must and cannot be but somewhat external to ourselves an event that happened. And from hence, we conclude that there is and cannot but be and cannot just be designed by human action for the constitution of the phenomenon. And the condition that actually took place cannot just be a process of a natural course of things. There is most evident ground to think, as a matter of fact, and a thing of experience, that it was the Blessed Mother Mary who appeared to Teresita Castillo. Observing the effects of the apparition event will make us be strongly inclined to believe it because of the overwhelming presence of external evidence consistent with our Christian beliefs, a real confirmation of its truth. The message given in the apparition informs us on how we have to live our Christian life, instruct us how we are to behave, and what we are to expect in consequence of our behavior. Especially the Blessed Mother gave us a serious admonition in our guard and respect of the tradition of praying the Holy Rosary and be consecrated to Jesus as slaves through Mary. Allow me to read some messages of Mary to Tersing. On September 13, 1948, Mary said to Sister Tersing, "My child, be faithful in coming here." She was referring to the operation site. Rain or shine, please pray for priests and nuns and help me by doing some penance for them. Pray for them as you have not prayed before. The Sacred Heart of my son bleeds anew for every fallen priest or nun. To some, pride has been the obstacle to going back to the true fold, and shame has hardened their hearts. Notice how she emphasized about priests and nuns. Again, on November 12, 1948, Mary, standing above the vine, said to Tersing, "Pray, my child. The people do not heed my words. Tell my daughters that there will be persecution, unrest, and the church will suffer much. Propagate the devotion to my Immaculate Heart. Pray for the conversion of sinners. Pray for those who reject me and those who do not believe my message in the different parts of the world. I am really sad, but consoled by those who believe me and those who trust me. May all of you remain simple, humble, generous in making sacrifices for priests and nuns. They are closest to the heart of my son." You may ask, why Mary repeats about Tersing about praying for nuns and priests? The answer is this: because priests and nuns are the closest to the heart of his or her son. Again, 43 years later, on May 26, 1991, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Mary said to Sister Tersing, "Be happy, my little one, for I do care for you. Be generous in times of trial, for my maternal love will protect you. Remain very simple at heart, as I want you to be. Do not be afraid, for my love for you will be your strength. Lastly, dry my tears, my little ones, tears caused by fallen priests and nuns, with your loving willingness to suffer for me." I love my little daughters of Lipa Carmel, and I bless them all as I promised before. I can read your mind and your hearts, and I know the trials you encounter, which serve as graces coming from me. They are acts of love, especially to those who believe, a consolation to those who suffer, and a reward to those who work for me. But these showers will not be for long. I am happy that you are still the same little one as before. I know how you suffered and will still suffer for my fallen priests and nuns. The days are counted and judgment will come. In effect, Mary was telling Tersing that her suffering was one way of telling us that her suffering was for those fallen priests and nuns. On October 25, 1993, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Mary said to Tersing, "Little one, I love the Philippines very much because most Filipinos are so devoted to me. So it is from this beloved country that I appeal for prayers, little sacrifices, frequent reception of the Holy Eucharist, family rosaries, and more consecration to my Immaculate Heart. But I am very sad because the Philippines has now been invaded by selfishness and greed. Many are now enslaved by money and ambition. Many even doubt that I am the mother of the Savior. I heard that in what you have read on Father Gobi's book. Many even doubt that I am the mother of the Savior. I am sad and weary, but tell the people of God to do the praying, and I will do the pleading while I can still plead for more time, mercy and compassion." My dear children who are consecrated to God, live your comfortable lives while I can still plead for more time and preach to the people about what is coming. It will be something the whole world will regret. God's wrath still held back by my pleading hands. I am asking the world to repent and be converted. I, as a mother who loves God's people, would not like to witness God's plan of punishment. Please pray. Please heed my messages so that many souls will go back to my only son, Jesus. This will make him very, very happy. In one of my colloquiums with the late Cardinal Ricardo Vidal, being my spiritual director, one time I visited him in Cebu. I asked him about the message regarding China given to Teresita Castillo. What he revealed was one of the secrets given to Tersing by the Blessed Mother Mary in 1949, October 17, 1949, and can only be revealed by him being the local ordinary of the Archdiocese of Lipa. And the message goes this way: pray hard, for China's dream is to invade the whole world. The Philippines is one of its favorites. Money is the evil force that will lead the people of the world to destruction. When I asked Sister Tersing about it, she said, "Yes, Father, it is one of the secrets given to me by Our Lady." And I shared it to Cardinal Vidal because he is the local ordinary of the place, the Archdiocese of Lipa. My dear friends, the late Father Pablo Fernandez of the Dominican Order of the Philippines remarkably grasped points about the Lipa apparition. In his letter, to Archbishop Mariano Gabiola, a former local ordinary of the Archdiocese of Lipa. He narrated that in 1956, after the death of Father Juan Ilia, a Dominican priest, he found among his papers some documents pertaining to the Lipa apparition. After reading, he put them in the archives of the Dominican fathers, but unfortunately, they disappeared probably when he was in Spain during the years 1961 to 1964. It is interesting his impression regarding the Lipa event, and he says, I quote, "The conclusion I arrived at after having read those papers was that the apparitions and first showers of petals were genuine. But later, through somebody's intervention for human reasons or interest, they were given a wrong direction. I have maintained until now this judgment of mine, especially when hearing the good life that Teresita Castillo had led after she was condemned. I am sure that she was innocent and was always acted in good faith. Besides, she is virtuous a person who has taken her trial patiently and submissively. She is a very normal lady." Father Fernandez, together with their confrere Father Angel de Blas, the chief investigator of the Lipa event, threw light on fundamental things we need to know about Teresita Castillo and the Lipa events. Hearing these spiritual deep authorities, we can safely conclude that Teresita Castillo was never demonically possessed. We are given as well an enlightened understanding about the truth of the matter, that there was nothing demonic in the Lipa apparition. It is not a mere coincidence that what Father Fernandez and Father de Blas said about Teresita are the same. Father Pablo Fernandez, Father, said, and I quote, "But we may ask ourselves, why 6 bishops chosen to examine the apparitions and showers of petals finally reached an unfavorable decision? Here lies the crux of the problem. The reason may be that something went wrong or after the apparitions. In those days, it was said that a sister used a blower to scatter petals for the purpose of obtaining donations to build the chapel. And recently I heard that the sister is still alive, although belonging to another religious community. By the way, when I asked this Mother Jacinta, the late Mother Jacinta, who was already there during the operation, she said to me, "We don't have blower in the community because we don't have electricity." She does not even know what is a blower. And the religious sister, for the information of everybody, that being referred to by Father Fernandez and even Father Angel de Blas was Sister Lucia del Mundo, who entered the Religious of the Virgin Mary, the RBM. This is one of the many speculations that surfaced to destroy the credibility of the apparition events. Some authorities cleverly made it appear that everything in the event was a hoax and people involved created deceits using some sisters inside the Carmel Monastery. Some church authorities built a wall of intrigues to keep people away from the events. Certainly, it is necessary to unmask the deceivers, and one of them was mentioned by Father Angel de Blas in his journal. Regarding Bishop Alfredo Obiar, Father Fernandez said, of course you know about Bishop, the Venerable Bishop Alfredo Obiar, the former spiritual directors of the Carmelite nuns, and especially of Teresita Castillo. Father Fernandez said, Similarly, I see nothing wrong in the conduct of Monsignor Obiar, except perhaps that he was a victim of oversimplicity. And here, we must not bypass one important fact. And the fact is that there is a marked tendency among theologians and confessors to disregard mystical phenomena a priori, due perhaps not to lack of knowledge, but to lack of experience about such happenings. I believe, Father Fernandez added, I believe that knowledge of theology is not enough to pass judgment on such extraordinary events. Some amount of experience is needed also. That is why some confessors find themselves at a loss when a privileged soul discloses to them a mystical experience and not knowing what to do, Dismiss her as a victim of a hallucination. It shows here that Father Fernandez was a hard realist in spiritual matters. He was an assimilationist on matters like this. He seriously considers effective measures and not just a matter of book reading. Father Fernandez had a solidly and firmly grounded spiritual claim in guiding souls. Actually, as I heard from Teresita, Father Pablo Fernandez became also spiritual director and confessor. Father Fernandez wisely said, and I quote, "As we cannot say with absolute certainty that the apparition was genuine, so we cannot affirm with the same degree of certainty that the bishops reached the right decision." This is a very prudent statement of Father Fernandez. The bishops might have the best intentions for the good of the church, but the consequences of their actions have led to much confusion and contradiction. Bishop Guerrero, the late Bishop Guerrero, and some other bishops, because it was literally forced on them, have obviously realized the error they have made in appending their signatures on the 1951 diocesan negative verdict on the Lipa apparition. Our very own bishops have been coerced. In search of truth, allow me to continue. I have explored some thorny issues held at our devotion by those who are against mediatrix devotion. This frank look at the Lipa event poses a question that everyone must ultimately face. I am starting to discover frightening trends that deserve serious consideration. And allow me to share with you. Vod Sacre was the bull issued by St. Paul John the 23rd on October 22, 1960, creating the Diocese of Borongan, Eastern Samar. And on April 11, 1961, the late Bishop Vicente Reyes was installed as the first bishop of the diocese. Bishop Vicente Reyes was one of the 6 Filipino bishops who signed the diocesan negative verdict in April 1951 about the Lipa apparition. Taking a closer look, the bishops who signed the 1951 verdict were newly promoted in the years immediately after. Father Vicente Reyes went from being a priest to being named Auxiliary Bishop of Manila on June 1950. And on January 19, 1961, appointed as first Bishop of Borongan, Eastern Samar. Those who consecrated him were Archbishop Egidio Banyotzi, Bishop Rufino Santos, and Bishop Alejandro Olalia. One of the recent investigators on Lipa had a very startling point, the reason why the verdict was done hastily. The author said, she's an American author, perhaps the case of Lipa was simply an occasion for the promoted bishops to apply their new authority. Perhaps the apparitions in the cloister in the provinces were simply too much of a nuisance to a church whose leadership was desperate to reign in its ranks. As was suggested by one of the Lipa priests mentioned, sabi nung parin to, takot sila that a positive verdict on the apparition and miracles would provoke a global phenomenon in their backyard, the limelight and pressure of which they could not bear. On February 26, 1968, Bishop Godofredo Pedernal was appointed as the new bishop of the Diocese of Borongan to succeed Bishop Vicente Reyes, who was newly appointed as the Bishop of Cabanatuan. Bishop Pedernal, in his affidavit executed on November 17, 1994, subscribed and sworn to Justice Sari Demetrio, narrated that in 1948, he had witnessed a shower of petals gingerly cascading from the gutter or walls of the convent and gently falling to the ground. Twice he witnessed the miraculous shower of petals in 1948 and 1949. He strongly believes that the obstinate attitude of Cardinal Santos and Cardinal Bagnozzi was a grim reflection on their prejudgment of the Lipa events without the usual thorough investigation or inquiry expected of an objective and impartial church authority. Bishop Pedernal was convinced that the Lipa Commission in 1951 was too in a hurry to close its investigation. How the 1948 Lipa operation was dealt with shows an unprecedented level of manipulation, distortion, and spectacularly unsuccessful church power politics. But God did not disappoint us. Ahead of time, two important landmarks to guide us: the lives of Venerable Alfredo Obiar, the bishop assigned as spiritual director of the Carmelite Sisters in Lipa, and the servant of God, Bishop Alfredo Bersosa, the assigned local ordinary of the Archdiocese of Lipa. These two are the fruits of the Lipa apparition events. The lines are clearly demarcated between what was done by Cardinal Rufino Santos and the servant of God, Bishop Alfredo Bersosa. We are beginning to see the difference between the two. Scarcely after the arrival of Archbishop Bagnozzi to the Philippines, Archbishop Bersosa was removed from his office unceremoniously by Bagnozzi and Santos. Uncritical readers of history will actually find it normal looking at it with what other priests spread the possible reasons of his removal. But the act of removing him signaled a bad omen to the mediatrix devotion. In dealing with the mediatrix issue, Bagnozzi and Santos were aggressive, enterprising, and shrewd. When Bersosa was removed, the dealing with the mediatrix apparition underwent a complete and real reversal, especially when Cardinal Santos was positioned as apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Lipa. Archbishop Bersosa dealt with the mediatrix properly as expected, being the local ordinary of the place. He made things in an atmosphere of justice, discernment, and prudence by appointing Father Angel de Blas, the Dominican, as head of the commission to investigate the apparition. Bersosa aided with the commission, studied the event on its own merits. What was started by the Archbishop was weakened, revised, and stifled altogether by his successor. I'm referring to Cardinal Santos. This has been the faith of the saintly Archbishop Alfredo Bersosa, which impoverished him. He saw how the mediatrix devotion crumbled before his eyes, how believers will be limited to prescriptions issued by Santos and negative criticisms about the devotion. No one defended Archbishop Alfredo Bersosa. He suffered alone. He embraced his sterile isolation with divine resignation, looking at God's will. He found courage in accepting his faith. He was a real believer in what is right, just, and true. He was forced to accept a situation that definitely and irreversibly changed him. He would become a saint. The indifference and apathetic treatment he received from others, especially the authorities, will make it shine how heroically he lived a virtuous life. In trying to trace the historical developments of the Lipa apparition, we must carefully distinguish at the outset the role played by the Venerable Bishop Alfredo Obiar. He was said to be a believer of the Lipa apparition, as confirmed by Teresita herself, and even by the late Cardinal Ricardo Vidal, my spiritual director. His zeal for the welfare of the Lipa Carmelite community as their spiritual director was rewarded by Our Lady by giving him the gift of faith on her apparition. His belief in the apparition is a fact generally recognized not only by Sister Tersing and Mother Mary Cecilia, the prioress, during the apparition, but also by Bishop Godofredo Pedernal, the former bishop of the Diocese of Borongan. The belief of Venerable Obiar on the apparition became the revelation that truly what happened in Lipa has to do with God. This brings us to a greater understanding of what kind of a spiritual director was Bishop Alfredo Obiar. Like the servant of God Alfredo Bersosa, Venerable Obiar suffered the same. Church politics exerted its influence on the matter and shaped the issue according to the interests of the authorities. The saintly bishop tried to defend his belief on behalf of the Carmelite community in Lipa, but loosened when his local ordinary, the servant of God Alfredo Bersosa, was unceremoniously removed. Venerable Obiar's loyalty and deepest respect for the community were always on the edge of danger and took a toll on him. His devotion to the community and belief in the apparition fell prey to a minority of authorities who were in a position to stop and strangle it. As a result, he was removed as the spiritual director of the Carmelite community and eventually was transferred to another diocese assigned as apostolic administrator. The present crisis did not destroy and demoralize him. He remained steadfast in his life of virtue and was heroically obedient to the authorities and perfectly observed silence not to talk about the Lipa event. He was prohibited, like Mother Cecilia, to talk about the Lipa apparition. For what reason, it was not clear. He derived his strength to obey the church from her devotion to Mary and belief in the mediatrix apparition. His devotion to Mary, mediatrix of all grace, ennobled his motives and intensified his affection to follow the Lord in his suffering. Some church authorities, by treating him the way, just brought the Spirit. By treating him that way, just brought the Spirit of Christ present in him. He was victorious in his trials. He obviously encountered the natural selfishness of human nature through his authority. And no matter how hostile it was to him, he preserved his peace. His life with God gave an immense reinforcement to bear all the trials. The Lipa event created in him moral conviction, and he was able to transcend the unnariness of his authorities. That's what I have to share with you about the life of Bishop Obiang. It is used out of convenience. Let me share with you about the life of Mother Cecilia. It is used out of convenience. The repeatedly said confession letters of the prioress Mother Cecilia regarding the Lipa event to justify their derogatory claims against the mediatrix. And it is only fair that we know the truth about Mother Cecilia, the prioress. It is disheartening to note that this part of Mother Cecilia's role is not yet fully understood till now and is easily misinterpreted by those who are against the apparition. Others would say about her role in a scholarly and discreet way. Others are coarse and brutal, while others resorted to vulgar annihilation of Mother Cecilia's reputation. Many times, with these varied interpretations, the best intention of Mother Cecilia is perverted and deliberately ignored. The desire of some sisters during the apparition to shame, humiliate, and get the best in everything, even at the expense of the reputation of the Carmelite community, ran very deep. No matter how much they tried to hide their vindictiveness as deep as they can, it welled up and found expression in a variety of unlikely ways, as we have seen it. Dreadful things had been done against Mother Cecilia and Teresita in the name of religion. The sisters who connived with religious authorities were plagued by terrible perfectionism, ambition, vindictiveness, and envy. These attackers of the mediatrix apparition made unrealistic and unreasonable demands of Sister Terseng and Mother Cecilia. They have bypassed to understand the good intention of Mother Cecilia as the Mother Prioress. They failed to notice the good heart of Mother Cecilia. Here we see clearly a true quality of a servant of God, embracing the will of God in difficult moments and given no choice to defend herself. The life of Mother Cecilia, as I heard it from her contemporaries, was a life marked by generosity to suffer the consequences of her choice to believe the truth. It was a life in truth. No one can equal how much freedom and awareness she gave herself to suffering. The saving grace of God in her reaches into the depth of her human heart when she accepted and became her choice to suffer for the mediatrix. As she expressed herself to Mother Amy, this was narrated by Mother Amy about Mother Cecilia's intention to offer her life for the vindication of the mediatrix. A genuine deepening awareness of her inner conviction that indeed Mother Mary, the mediatrix of all grace at Lipa Carmel Monastery in 1948, appeared to Sister Teresita Castillo. Mother Mary Cecilia, the prioress, during the operation, was given a share, a lot to suffer, and that lot is the gift of being visited by the Mother of God. Her cause of joy is at the same time her suffering. The cause of joy of Mother Cecilia is at the same time her suffering. Why do we have to assert ourselves as devotees of the Mary Mediatrix, contrary to what the exorcists of Manila have been propagating? Because they have no single explanation that reflects the compassion of the church, but rather the imprudent statements against Mary Mediatrix of all grace provoke tremendous controversy among faithful. They claim to be keepers of faith, but they want a faith that can be manipulated. They claim to sustain a tradition, but they fail to recognize that a tradition they have in mind is politically biased, prejudiced, and self-promoting. It suits them, in other words. Their statement issued against the mediatrix devotion is repulsive, disturbing, deceptive, and cunning. I spotted this statement from them, and I quote, "As the Vatican says that it is not supernatural, then automatically we have to say that it is. Therefore, there was really no real apparition of Our Lady. And therefore, as Catholics, the most important thing is always obedience. That is a sign of humility." As I quote, I would like to remind the exorcists about obedience. Obedience presupposes good legislation founded on the truth that will contribute to the well-being of the faithful. Obedience is taught not the way they do it, but by awakening the faithful to what is truly good and supporting their fragile devotion by few but wise and firm directives, as done by Cardinal Quevedo. The pastoral instructions issued by Cardinal Quevedo to guide us about our devotion to Mary Mediatrix of all grace. They want faithful to humble, so that faithful will obey whatever they say. Have they forgotten that obedience and humility are grounded in truth? They pushed the button on a whim And now the inevitable proving of their destructive thoughts lies ahead, and it's becoming out of control. They have to face the truth. They should have learned enough to figure out the truth of the matter. Now that it was discovered that there's no such thing as the 1951 papal decree existing in the Vatican archives, used by them to justify their claim in demonizing the mediatrix devotion. This new discovery paves the way and leads us to clarify some points written in the 2015 Vatican Decree. Ang kanilang katahimikan sa bagong kaganapang ito nang matuklasan na wala pala ang 1951 Papal Decree sa Vatican Archives ay hindi isang kasagutan. At kailangan din na ang mga nagmamahal at naniniwala sa mediatrix na humingi ng paglilinaw kay Cardinal Ludwig Muller tungkol dito upang maintindihan natin ang nakapaloob sa 2015 Vatican Decree. May mga bagay na naisulat sa Vatican Decree 2015 na hindi ayon sa katotohanan, kundi mga haka-haka lamang. Isang pagkakamali ay ang pangalang Teresa. Kung ang tinutukoy rito ay ang nakakita ng birhen, ang pangalan niya ay Teresita at hindi Teresa. Ito ay hindi karaniwang pagkakamali at ito ay hindi nangyayari sa mga dekretong Batikano. Kung may ipinahahayag ang Vatican sa isang dekreto, ito ay tumpak o eksakto. Hindi katha-katha, hindi masalita, at may malinaw na kahulugan. Na siya namang kulang sa nasabing 2015 Vatican Decree. At lahat ng decree ng Santo Papa ay nakalathala sa Acta Apostolicae Sedes. Ito ba ang kasagutan kung bakit hindi nakalagay sa Acta Apostolicae Sedes ang sinasabing 1951 Papal Decree dahil ito ay wala? Ang humingi ng paglilinaw tungkol sa 2015 Vatican Decree ay isang maayos na pamamaraan upang palalimin natin ang pagmamahal sa ating inang simbahang Katolika at paniniwala na ang katotohanan lamang ang ating ipinagtatanggol at sinusunod. Uulitin ko, hinihingi natin ito na gawin ang linawin ang mga bagay na ito, lalo na ng mga taong nagsasabing may 1951 Papal Decree. Dahil ito ang kanilang kinasangkapang gamitin na sirain ang debosyon kay Maria Mediatrix at aparisyon at sa mga taong nauugnay sa debosyong Mediatrix. Ito ang akmang panahon na ipaliwanag ng mga eksorsist ng Manila ang kanilang paniniwala tungkol sa 1951 Papal Decree dahil ito din ang naging pundasyon sa mga nilalaman ng 2015 Vatican Decree. The discovery that alleged 91 Papal Decree is non-existent is already a good sign of development. I have heard that there are people asking that they be provided and shown the certification from the Vatican that the said Papal Decree does not exist. I do not think Justice Demetrio will invent something or expose anything that is not backed up by any evidence. If she said so, being a judge and a former justice of the Sandigan Bayan, her integrity being a truthful judge and a champion in defending the truth and seeking justice for all, there is truth in what she said. And we have not known of any archives certifying on the non-existence of something. They just certify what they have in their archives. For those who doubt the discovery of Justice Sarit, please check the Vatican archives, like what Justice Demetrio did. This is the right time for those who have been claiming the existence of the alleged 1951 papal decree to show us, devotees, your proofs. But beware thinking of just producing something to satisfy the curiosity of anyone, because everything that will be presented will undergo thorough scrutiny and verification. The same process will be applied to the said confession letters of Mother Cecilia, the prioress. We are confident about this because we have the specimen of Mother Mary Cecilia's handwriting and signature. So what are the crimes, my dear brothers and sisters, committed against Mary Mediatrix of all grace? I'm about to finish. What are the crimes committed against Mary Mediatrix of all grace? Apart from canons 1390 and 1391, which is about the crime of falsehood, the offense committed against our devotion to Mary, Mediatrix of all grace, the apparition and people associated with it, are not only a violation of these two canon provisions, but also offenses against several canonical provisions, namely, in Canon 1369, it says, a person who in public show or speech, in published writing, or in other uses of the instruments of social communication, utters blasphemy, gravely injures morals, expresses insults, or excites hatred or contempt against religion or the church, is to be punished with just penalty. The canon envisions four possible violations. Number one, blasphemy. It means deliberately speaking irreverently or contemptuously of God. Number two, degrading character of a presentation and potentially scandalous impact upon a group's religious sensibilities and intentional attacks on good morals. Number three, direct attacks on religion, especially behavior prompting hatred or contempt of religion or the church. Number four, by using media, public activity, such as public gathering or a written publication that grievously offended the religious sensibilities of a significant number of persons. Such offense calls for a perceptive or obligatory ferende sententia penalty. Acts done, published in journals, letters, bias studies for the purpose of destroying the said devotion or speech against the images of Mary Mediatrix of all grace, the visionary, the group of devotees, the apparition and persons, nuns, priests, and bishops who are directly associated with the Mediatrix devotion, committed by the exorcists and prelates, are serious canonical crimes and should be given a just measure to protect and foster the integrity of our church faith and ensure the appropriate freedom of expression of one's faith as Catholic believers. They are grievously offending us, devotees of Mary Mediatrix of all grace. Canon 1371, in addition to the case mentioned in Canon 1364, paragraph 1, a person who teaches a doctrine condemned by the Roman Pontiff or an ecumenical council or obstinately rejects the doctrine mentioned in Canon 750, paragraph 2, or in Canon 752, and who does not retract, having been admonished by the Apostolic See or an ordinary. The deliberate will of the exorcist and some prelates, conniving with them, to destroy the images of Mary Mediatrix of all grace, as said by one of them in his letter to his superior is against the teaching of Saint John Damascene, who defended in the 8th century the veneration of sacred images. His defense of sacred icons after his death was upheld by the Second Ecumenical Council of Nicaea in the year 787 AD, and therefore his teaching is the official teaching of the said council about the veneration of sacred images and the teaching of the magisterium. I would like to remind the exorcists and some prelates in the Philippines who are against our devotion to Mary Mediatrix of all grace, that our veneration paid to the sacred images of Mary, Mediatrix of all grace, is legitimate and merit special veneration because Mary's unique personal possession in the economy of our salvation. Furthermore, they should not forget that we are taught as Catholics that the respect and veneration paid to sacred images are not directly addressed to the material substance of which the images are made, but to the person they represent. This is to acknowledge that God works through the creatures he has made. The teaching of the exorcists of the Archdiocese of Manila to destroy the images of Mary Mediatrix of all grace is against Canons 1371 and 1376 and the Second Ecumenical Council of Nicaea in 787 AD about the veneration of sacred images. This is a doctrinal violation, thus it warrants a perceptive ferende sententiae penalty. And if given serious attention and time, the acts of the exorcist, the offenders, may even be guilty of heresy. And finally, Canon 1389, paragraph 1, a person who abuses an ecclesiastical power or function is to be punished according to the gravity of the acts or omission, not excluding privation of office, unless a law or precept has already established the penalty for this abuse. Paragraph 2. A person who through a culpable negligence illegitimately places or omits an act of ecclesiastical power, ministry, or function with harm to another is to be punished with just penalty. The devotion and devotees of Mary Mediatrix of all grace and persons, priests and bishops, nuns, directly associated with it, face a lot of abuses done by authorities. A deliberate, culpable official negligence, damaging the Lipa Carmel Monastery, the apparition, the visionary, and persons associated with it, especially but not exclusively, if these authorities are found civilly liable because of such negligence, as understood in the canons of the Catholic Church, in a special grave situations, may even be deprived of office. One cannot just circumscribe the law of the Church according to one's purpose and intention. The laws follow the path of truth and seek justice. To conclude, may I quote Father Angel de Blas, the chief investigator of the Lipa apparition, about what he said of Sister Teresita Castillo. I quote, "There is no rational explanation for a young lass from a well-to-do family who would be capable of experiencing all the pleasures from the refined society in which we, the fortunate, are gifted with. Be inspired during a whole life to consecrate herself to Christ at Carmel, who had to fight valiantly against the opposition of her parents, brothers, and finally had to pursue her vocation by selling her belongings to offer a dowry and escape her home to join the convent. With but 15 days from her entry, be willing to be subject to such disorder and accept to become an instrument of an infamous plot to safeguard dishonest desires. I am referring about the accusation they have on Thursday saying that she had a lesbian relationship with the mother prioress. That is what is being referred by Father Angel de Blas. I continue. Father Angel de Blas said, I do not believe that if anyone were to treat her without prejudice, would consider her capable of such an aberration. On the other hand, Teresita does not manifest in her structural anatomy, nor in her voice, nor in her deportment, any of the characteristics attributable to the inverted feminine sex. If we were to take events in general, it is evident that Teresita must be classified under the group called visionaries or seers. In my conversations with Teresita, I have tried without her becoming aware to lead the questioning, to find out the possibility of the diabolic intervention. Her replies in this respect, examined according to the rules set by the authors of the spiritual life for these cases, demonstrate that the devil has not taken part in these events. Thus far, what I can say about Teresita, because I was her confessor, and I have to reserve the other things I have to tell about her. Thank you. That's all what I have to share with you.